I'm not the kind of person who believes in ghosts or the supernatural. I've always been more skeptical, relying on logic and reason to explain away the noises of the night. But what happened to me one fateful night changed everything I thought I knew. It was a typical evening like any other. I crawled into bed, exhausted from a long day of work, and drifted off into a restless sleep. However, my peaceful slumber was soon interrupted by a strange sound. At first, I dismissed it as part of a dream, but as I slowly regained consciousness, I realized it was coming from my phone. Groggily, I reached for my phone on the bedside table and squinted at the bright screen. 3 a.m. What could possibly be so important at this hour? As I glanced at the screen, I noticed something unsettling. Siri was activated and her voice echoed in the darkness of my room. What scared me the most was the fact that I hadn't uttered a single word. I frowned, my confusion growing. What was going on? Why was Siri turned on? Then, I noticed something even more chilling. The screen displayed a series of questions that Siri had supposedly answered, all while I was asleep. Questions like, what is my name? And what is my phone number? My heart pounded in my chest as I scrolled through the list of questions, each one more disturbing than the last. Fear gnawed at my mind as I realized the implications of what was happening. Someone, or something, was manipulating Siri, using her to gain information on me in the dead of night. With a quivering voice, I asked another question, my voice barely above a whisper. Is anyone there? The response came quickly. I am the one who watches you while you sleep, Samantha. Panic surged through me, and I bolted upright in bed, my heart racing as I glanced around the darkened room. Was someone in my house? Had they been watching me all this time? But there was no one there, just the eerie silence of the night, broken only by the faint hum of electronics and the sound of my own breathing. I desperately tried to silence Siri, to put an end to this nightmare. But no matter how many times I tried to shut her off, she continued to respond with the same unsettling answers, her voice growing more insistent with each passing moment. As the minutes ticked by, I felt a sense of dread settle over me like a suffocating blanket. I was trapped in a waking nightmare, with no way out and no one to turn to for help. But just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, something happened. The voice of Siri began to fade, growing fainter and fainter until it was nothing more than a distant echo in the recesses of my mind. As suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The room fell silent once again, and I was left alone in the darkness. It was one of those restless nights where sleep eluded me like a fleeting shadow. Tossing and turning in bed, I finally decided to give up on the pursuit of sleep and wandered downstairs to the kitchen, hoping a glass of warm milk might lure my weary mind into submission. As I reached the bottom step, a peculiar sensation washed over me, a chill that seemed to seep through my very bones. Ignoring the goosebumps prickling my skin, I flicked on the kitchen light and poured myself a drink, my eyes scanning the darkness beyond the window. That's when I saw it. A figure standing just beyond the edge of the garden, obscured by the inky blackness of the night. My heart leapt into my throat as I squinted, but the figure remained shrouded in darkness, a mere silhouette against the backdrop of the moonlit night. My mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Was it a trick of the shadows? My sleep-deprived brain playing tricks on me? Or was there truly someone or something lurking just beyond the safety of my home? With trembling hands, I reached for my phone, the urge to call the police warring with the fear of drawing attention to myself. But before I could make a decision, the figure vanished into the night, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts. For the remainder of the night, I sat huddled in the kitchen, the warm glow of my phone screen offering me little solace against the encroaching darkness. Every creak of the floorboards and every rustle of the wind outside made my heart rise, and I found myself jumping at the slightest sound. Morning came, casting its feeble light into the corners of the room. With the first rays of dawn, the fear that had gripped me throughout the night began to fade, replaced by a sense of uneasy calm. Perhaps it had all been a product of my overactive imagination, a nightmare spun from the fabric of exhaustion and fear. But as the day wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, a sensation that lingered like a shadow at the edge of my consciousness. Every shadow seemed to hold a hidden menace, every sound a whispered threat. That night, as the clock struck 3, I found myself once again unable to sleep. The events of the previous night haunted my thoughts, refusing to be banished by any reason or logic. And then, just as before, I felt it. The same bone-deep chill that had gripped me the night before. This time, I was ready. With a newfound determination born of fear and desperation, I crept to the window and peered outside, my heart pounding in my chest. And there, just beyond the edge of the garden, stood the figure once again, its form a dark blot against the moonlit landscape. But this time, there was something different about it, a sense of malevolence that seemed to radiate from its very being. It stood perfectly still, its eyes fixed on me with a cold intensity that made me freeze. Without stopping to think, I bolted from the room, my footsteps echoing through the silent house. I didn't dare look back, didn't dare entertain the thought of what might happen if I did. All that mattered was escape, escape from whatever lurked in the darkness outside. I made it to the front door, my hands fumbling with the lock in my haste to escape. And then, just as I felt the door give way beneath my fingers, I heard it, a low, guttural growl that seemed to reverberate through the very walls of the house. With a cry of terror, I flung the door open and stumbled out into the night, the cool night air washing over me. I didn't dare look back, didn't dare entertain the thought of what might be lurking just beyond the edge of the darkness. And so, dear reader, as I sit here now recounting the events of that fateful night, I can't help but wonder, what was it that lurked in the darkness outside my home? And more importantly, what might happen if it were to ever return? For in the dead of night, when all is still and silent, there are things that roam the earth, things that defy explanation and logic, things that exist only in the darkest of places. And as long as they remain there, lurking just beyond the edge of the light, none of us are truly ever safe. It was one of those nights where sleep seemed like a distant dream. I tossed and turned in my bed, the darkness of the room pressing in on me like a heavy blanket. I glanced at the digital clock on my nightstand. 2:59 blinked back at me, but as I lay there, my mind racing with thoughts I couldn't quite grasp, I heard it. It started as a faint scratching sound, echoing through the stillness of the night. I tried to brush it off as my imagination, but then it came again, louder this time, more insistent. My heart began to race as I sat up in bed, straining to listen. The sound seemed to be coming from downstairs, from the old storage room that we hardly ever used. I got up and glanced nervously at the door, feeling a chill creep up my spine. What could possibly be making that noise at this hour? As I made my way down the stairs, the scratching grew louder, more frantic. It sounded almost desperate, as if whatever was making it was trying desperately to escape from whatever darkness lurked in that storage room. I reached the bottom of the stairs and paused, my hand hovering over the door handle. My heart was pounding in my chest now, my palms slick with sweat, but it was too late to turn back now. I gripped the handle and swung the door open, the dim light from the hallway spilling into the room. What I saw next will haunt me for the rest of my life. There, huddled in the corner of the room, was a figure. Its back was turned to me, its shoulders shaking with what I could only assume was fear. But as I stepped closer, I realized with a sickening jolt that something was horribly wrong. The figure seemed to be melting, for lack of a better word. Its skin was sagging and drooping, like warm candle wax. And the smell. Dear God, the smell was enough to make my stomach churn. It was like rotting meat mixed with something far fouler, something I couldn't even begin to describe. I stumbled backwards, my mind reeling with shock and horror. What was happening? Was this some kind of sick joke? But as I watched, frozen in terror, the figure began to turn towards me, its face contorted into a grotesque mask of agony. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything to get away from whatever this thing was, but my body refused to move, rooted to the spot, as if held in place by some unseen force. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure was gone. One moment it was there, and the next, nothing. Only the faint echo of that scratching sound remained hanging in the air like a ghostly whisper. I bolted from the room, slamming the door shut behind me. I didn't stop running until I reached the safety of my own bedroom, where I locked the door and collapsed into bed, shaking and gasping for breath. I don't know what I saw in that storage room, and I'm not sure I want to know. All I know is that I will never forget the terror of that night, or the sound of that scratching, echoing through the darkness like an omen of doom. And as I lay here shaking in my own bed, I can only pray that whatever it was stays far away from me, and from anyone else foolish enough to stumble into its path. So, remember, the next time you hear a strange noise in the dead of night, think twice before investigating. You never know what horrors might be lurking in the shadows, waiting to drag you down into the depths of madness.